Today is Wednesday, the 14th of Mar Heshvan. Um, that it corresponds to what, the 20th of October, I believe, which is insane to me that it's already the 20th of October. But here we are, moving along, and we are dealing again with the chapter 109 or paragraph 109. It's hard to say, and of the first essay, and paragraph 4 of that paragraph, and we were talking about that the Torah gives us the reward. That's such a weird word for me to say today for whatever reason. It gives us the reward for fulfilling the Torah in this world. It doesn't talk much about Olam Haba or Gan Eden or the world to come, whatever it is that we're talking about. That the reward is here. Last week I brought up the Mishnah in Peyah, the first Mishnah in Peyah, that opens up our morning tefillot in many places as one of the words of Torah that we read. And it opens Elu Debarim, that these are these various actions have an effect on our souls in this world. Elu Debarim she'en lehem shi'ur, that there's no maximum to them. V'habikorim v'harayon, we said there was the first fruits, the pilgrimage offering, acts of goodness and kindness, and Talmud Torah. And that, what does this mean? It means these things, like we receive the reward for these things when we do them, straight away. When you leave the payah, the corner of your field, you see the people who need it come and get it straight away. You see how that affects everyone else around you. It's not like it doesn't slowly trickle down to whoever needs it. You see it happen like that, and it's a clear reward for you and for them. And then the next, that bikorim are the first fruits you bring to Jerusalem. You get to enjoy those first fruits in Jerusalem. That's like a nice thing. The rayon is the pilgrimage festival. That is its own reward. You get to. It's basically you going to. I don't know if we really don't have a. I guess like the. It's like the World Series, I suppose, or the Super Bowl. Like you get to be a part of this event. That's part of like the thing that doing it. We really don't have a. That's the closest thing I think in our society that we can think of as going on the pilgrimage festival or these massive national events. Gimlot Hasidim, that helps you, and then Talmud Torah, that is beneficial straight away. The next part of this Mishnah is Elu debarim she'adam ose otham ohel pirotehem be'olam hazeh ve'keren kayemet le'olam haba. The very interesting and very important phraseology that it's using here. And it says that these items, I don't know if items is the right way of translating it, but these, debarim, things, when you do them in this world, you eat the fruits of them, meaning you get to enjoy them straight away also, and the reward stays for you in the world to come. And it gives various examples of what those ones are here also. So I think what the Kuzari is doing here in our little paragraph here is he's alluding to this Mishnah, this Mishnaic teaching of the rabbis, that our olam, our reward is here and now. We're not concentrated on 70 virgins or 70 or gardens and mansions or whatever it is that the other religions are promising to their faithful. We might have an aspect of it. I'm not saying that it's totally absent from our tradition, but the chief reward of the Torah is closeness to God and the performance of the mitzvot. And that happens here in this world. Any comments, questions, concerns? Tov meod. Okay, now, Yoram, you have something to say? No, okay. Yeah? Go ahead. No? Okay. Okay, 4. I want to see everybody. I can see everybody now. Okay. And everyone can see 4. Our Torah. So it says like as follows. Our Torah and all its rewards are absolutely guaranteed. None of them has ever been or ever will be unfulfilled. It always comes to fruition. Yes, Irene, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi. I thought that for people who do good deeds and don't see a reward, that's why our theology included the world to come, that some people claim that they always do and they don't see the rewards.
What's the saying? There's no good deed that goes unpunished, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And it's a very good question and a very interesting point you're bringing up, because that seems to be the standard understanding, right? Yeah, don't worry so much. The real reward comes in the world to come, not here. But the Kuzari here is saying the exact opposite. Now, it could be that there's explaining one level of it, that what we think of as reward isn't the same of what the non-Jews think of a reward. And this is the difference between the idea of sechar and peras. Sechar is how we translate reward. We say that there is sechar ve'onesh in this world, and that's one of the principles, that we believe that God rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked. That's a principle of the Torah according to Harambam. And that if we deny this principle, we are denying a chief principle of Judaism, and according to some, lose our helik le'olam haba, which is a very interesting statement to make. Now, in Pirkei Avot, there is another teaching, though. The teaching is that you should not serve a god, our God, with the idea of receiving a peras, serve God as if you're not going to receive any reward, and then let the fear of heaven be upon you. So, this teaching comes from, I believe, from Antigonus Ish Sohal. He was one of the men of the Great Assembly, I think. Don't quote me on that. But Antigonus Ish Sohal says that you shouldn't serve God like you're going to receive a reward. But he doesn't use the word sehar. He uses the word peras. Now, he had two students, Baitus and Sadok. Baitus and Sadok heard this teaching of Antigonus Ish Sohal, Antigonus, the man of Soho. Not Soho in New York, but Soho. It's a place in northern Israel. And his students heard, oh my gosh, there must be no reward, because he said, serve God like you're not going to receive a peras. So Sadok and Baitus started two forms of heretical Judaism, if you will. Sadok started what's called the Sadducees, the Sadukim, and they denied a whole bunch of stuff. They denied the resurrection of the dead. They denied the Olam Haba and the reward to come in the world to come. They kind of had a kind of very nihilistic view of the world, and they were mostly of the priestly class. And then his second student, Baitus, started a lesser-known heretical sect known as the Bothians, I think it's called in English, or the Baitusim in Hebrew, but I think in English they call the Bothians. And they denied any sort of physical reward in this world as well. That you will suffer, but you will do mitzvot, and you should do the mitzvot even though you're suffering. Now, how does that relate? So how does this relate to the later rabbinic teaching of, like what you just said, the real rewards is in the world to come, so just live out your days. A good example of this is Vayera is this week's parasha. In last week's parasha, in the war of the 4 and 5 kings, Abraham Abinu, he takes his army and he defeats the king of Sodom, not the king of Sodom. He defeats the kings and he saves the people of Sodom, and this and that, and returns the men of Sodom to Sodom. And there's a midrash that explains that Abraham was afraid of his victory. Why? Because he was afraid he used up all of his merit in this world and was being deemed somehow wicked, because the wicked receive their merit in this world, and only the righteous receive the merit in the world to come. And that God reassures him that this is not the case, that he's going to be blessed, etc., etc., etc. So that touches on that. I'm not going to answer the question directly, but I do want to bring up these points because I think there's two different ideologies in Judaism that develop parallel to each other, and how we view reward is a big part of it. I think what the Kuzari here is saying, what the Chaber is saying, is that reward isn't mansions in the world to come, and it isn't mansions in this world as well. The reward is simply the idea that we get to do the mitzvah, and that we are close to God because of doing the mitzvah. Mitzvah goreret mitzvah, avera goreret avera. That the reward of a mitzvah is another mitzvah, and the reward or the punishment for a sin is another sin here. I think this is the teaching he's echoing here in this case. But it's a good question that you've asked, and I hope that we can keep it on our brain so it can stew as we read the rest of this essay. Yoram, please. Sorry for you had to wait.
Patience is a merit.
Mm-hmm.
To answer Irene, I would say when you do a mitzvah, the reward is always there because you feel good about it. You can say that you're closer to God, say whatever. I know when I do a good deed, I feel good about it. The only exception, I believe in Judaism, that you get the reward in this world and you get it physically, is doing tzedakah. You get 10 times what you give. And that's a contract with Hashem. And correct me, Yosef, if I'm wrong there. It's like you don't get reward in the world to come, a bigger penthouse in heaven. You get the reward in this world by giving tzedakah. And that's actually not between you and God. It's between you and your fellow men.
Thank you so much, Yoram. So,
My question is, do you agree with it?
Who, me or Irene?
No. That's tzedakah, the reward is in this world, and it's a multiple 10 times your tzedakah.
Yeah, that's a teaching that we definitely definitely in the definitely a teaching that we teach. It's definitely part of how we understand certain psukim, and it's definitely is part of the teaching. But however, and just to play the devil's advocate, I guess, is it the reason? It's not devil's advocate, but it's not the reason tzedakah is done, though, right? Tzedakah is the root of tzedek, meaning from the idea that it is the right thing to do. I think this is why this is a good translation of in this case is righteousness. It is something that is done for the right reason. You're doing it for the right reason. Even if you do it for the wrong reason, I want my name on this building, or I want to be a big Baal Tzedakah, it's a good mitzvah to do, to engage in. I want to focus on what the Kuzari is saying, despite the very good point the Aram is bringing up, because we need to understand what exactly is sechar. When we say something is a sechar, sechar, I think, in modern Hebrew, and I think even in Mishnaic Hebrew, it's usually understood as a wage. You do a certain amount of work, and then you receive a sechar for that work. Right? It's I think as Yoram said, contractual. Is that what you said? It's kind of like a cause and effect.
It's not a cause and effect. It's a contract. You go to work and you work 40 hours a week.
Right.
You get minimum wage or whatever. That's contractual.
Right, and that's called sechar, correct?
No, sechar could be. It is sechar, but sechar is broader than that.
Right, but I'm using this mashal on purpose. When you finish your 40 hours that week and you punch out, you don't go to the boss and say, I was thinking maybe you could give me a payment, and he goes, yes, I am going to give you this payment, and it's generous, and I am, he could, I don't know, he could be a terrible person, but he's legally obligated to give you that sechar. He can't withhold it from you.
No, it's a maskoret is your wage. That's your salary.
Yes.
So you join and you get a wage.
Yes. So
and by the way, the plus is a bonus, because in many jobs in corporate America, there is a discretionary bonus, and that's the plus.
That's the peras, correct. So when you serve a master, when you serve God, you're not doing it for the peras, because then you're just focusing on the bonus. Sechar here is just something that is, I don't want to say the natural outcome, it's the justified outcome of what you have done. That is a sechar. So, here, he's saying as follows. Did we start the paragraph? I'm sorry, I don't remember. I don't think we actually got there. Okay, now we're going to start it. Our Torah, and all its rewards are absolutely guaranteed. None of them has ever been or ever will be unfulfilled. All the rewards have one common denominator: the hope of drawing near to God and His angels. It's interesting that he says His angels, because it makes it seem like a what do you call it? A pantheon, which it's not, and I'll explain this in 1 second. Someone who achieves this level will not fear death, for he realizes the goodness that awaits him. Our Torah demonstrates the rewards that await us after death through the spiritual rewards of closeness that exist in this world. Now, let's read this footnote here, because this footnote is important. It's what I've said, but I think it just underscores it better than I've said it. With this, the rabbi has also explained why the Torah does not explicitly list the reward of the world to come. The ultimate reward in Judaism is closeness to God. This can be realized both in this world and in the world to come. The reason why the Torah refers only to the closeness that may be attained in this world, however, is similar to what the Kuzari stated above, that the rewards that come after death do not provide adequate incentive to the religionist. Now, otherwise, why would anyone be afraid to die? Just, I'm going to receive my ultimate reward. There was a story, you might have heard this story. I think it's a Lubavitch story, and I think it has to do with the Baal HaTanya, also known as the Alter Rebbe, or Rabbi Shneur Zalman Mileadi. You might not know this, but there's a picture, a very famous picture of the Alter Rebbe. Let's see if I can find it real quickly. Of Shneur Zalman. You see it on books of the Tanya. You see it on... You see it all over the place. And maybe once I show the picture, you'll be, yes, I know this picture. So let's see here. Yes, let me share it. Stop this share, and I'll share this share. Right here. Everyone seen this image of the Alter Rebbe? So apparently, this isn't like an official portrait of the Lubavitch world headquarters. This is actually his wanted poster, or a mugshot that they had put up for him, and that he was wanted by the whatever Russian police were policing at the time. And he was arrested for various anti-Semitic reasons, Jewish activities. At least that's what I've been told. I don't know from the inside, but that's what I've been told. And there's a story that he was being interrogated by these Russians, and that they slammed a gun on the table and wanted him to confess and do all these things, and they slammed this gun on the table and put a gun in his face, and threatened that they were going to shoot him and hurt him. And he basically responded, I'm paraphrasing, of course, that the gun does not scare him, because I believe in one God and many worlds, but you believe in one world and many gods. I have nothing to fear. I am going to be fine. However, the reason you are afraid of me is because you think that I'm taking away this world from you, or something like that. So he demonstrated what the Kuzari is saying here. He wasn't afraid of this death. He only feared God. And the interesting thing, as a side note, when one fears God, has a true Yirat Hashem, it removes all other fears from them. In a sense, they become fearless. It's a real difficult level to attain. I'm not saying it's a normal, natural position, but it's definitely something that we've seen not only in the great giants of the past, but even over closer to our generations. And when Jews are put, when they have this choice in front of them, you see the choices that they do make when it comes to standing up for what their heritage and what their Torah tells them. Now, this statement here, Yechul Kirubata Elohim Malacham, that it brings them close to God and the angels. The way I understand this is as follows. Last week, I think we were discussing the idea that the prophets are considered melachim, that we call them melachim, and as we'll see in a few weeks, when Yaakov goes to the Sulam, it says that the angels are ascending and descending the ladder, and the way that we understand that is it's the prophets that he sees ascending and descending the ladder. There's a mitzvah, according to Rambam, to be devekut Hashem, to cleave to God. So how does one cleave to God? You come close to the scholars. That's how he understands it. And so I think here when he says that they come close to God and to the angels, he's saying that he's drawing near to God by drawing near to the angels. And what's drawing near to the angels? Drawing near to scholars, drawing near to nature, drawing near to things that leave an imprint of God in the world, and gives him that by definition will get you closer to God. That's how I think he understands it. Not that there are like a army of angels around God that you come close to as well, like it's some sort of entourage. In fact, I'll tell you this. Something I learned recently. It's a cute little thing. It's not like a mind-blowing thing, but it's adorable. Gemara. The word Gemara is a Rosh Tevot. How do you say Rosh Tevot? It's an acronym of the four angels, Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, Uriel. Gemara equals to these people, or these angels, I should say. So why is it? What does it mean? What's the point of saying such a statement? I think the point of such a statement is to say that you are coming close to the ministering chambers when you study Torah in a proper fashion and you come to proper conclusions. You come close to ministering angels. So this is what the Kuzari is saying here by coming close to the angels. Now, this idea of the true reward is closeness to God. The true sechar is that when we say, and this is, maybe you've heard of this, the Kiruv movement, and I don't like the Kiruv movement as a whole. I think there's lots of problems with the Kiruv movement. The Kiruv movement is this outreach movement that happens on campuses, in young professional circles, and where you have rabbis going out to communities and trying to outreach and bring closer people to traditional or Orthodox, usually Orthodox Judaism. There's many reasons I have a problem with it. I don't want to get into that now, and it's mostly about practices I don't agree with. But the idea of kiruv, being drawn close, it's not that it's not that they're like the Rebbe from Lubavitch also had a problem with it. He said, draw close. Who are you to draw close? You think you're better than these people just because you whatever? But the idea here is that they're becoming closer to their heritage, in a sense, closer to the actions that God is asking them to do, and that is itself, it's its own reward. Eleanor, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, you were just talking about how to become closer to God, and you were using the examples of being close to scholars and being close to nature.
Yeah.
Why is it not being close to those who are kind to others?
That's being close to a scholar.
Kindness?
Yeah, like people who are kind. This is the idea. People who are kind are also people who are scholars. Like that's rabbi. So like if you know a rabbi who's a jerk, he's not really a rabbi. I mean, yeah, he might have a piece of paper who says I'm a rabbi, blah blah blah, but it's not. He's not a talmid. He or her is not a talmid chachamim. A Talmid Chachamim embodies the teachings of the sages. And to embody the teaching of the sages means that you are an exemplar of kindness. You're an exemplar of politeness, of empathy. You care about others. One of the terminologies that the Sephardim had for the rabbis was the Haver Ha'ir, the friend of the city. Right? And in fact, the terminology used for the Hacham in our book right now is He Haver, the friend. Someone who's kind, someone who is relatable, someone who's not sitting in some priestly tower of gadolusness or whatever. Gadolatry, that's the word I'm looking for. It's they are kind and sympathetic and caring. But it's more. But the reason is, why not just kind people then? I have a nice friend. He's an idiot. He doesn't know anything about Judaism, but he's so sweet. He's so kind. The kindness is great, but it's the problem is that you can't just be I'm not saying uninformed. You can't be willfully uninformed. When I was in yeshiva, I remember I would say something to correct someone's pronunciation of something. You know, they would say this. They would say "me raglim," and I'd say "me reglaim." Right? "Me raglim." I don't know what that means. "Me reglaim" means something else. And they would say, but in my family we have a custom of saying it this way, or we don't have a custom of saying it with the proper grammar. It was more problematic. And the thing is, like, you can't have a custom to be wrong. You can have a custom to have you can't have a custom to be willfully ignorant. You can't have a custom to say, I'm never going to look into this way of doing things. So that's what it means by a sage. And like there are many examples of sage in our tradition. And we see that even when David HaMelech, we see in Pirkei Avot, someone who learns even the letter Aleph from somebody else should treat that person as a rabbi in their eyes. They might not be the brightest rabbi or the most knowledgeable rabbi, but they've taught them something to connect them to their heritage. So this is why in our culture, in Jewish culture, the cream of the crop were the Chachamim. It wasn't the rich people. It wasn't the writers or the poets or the artisans. It was the Chachamim. The Chachamim spanned the socioeconomic classes. You had Chachamim who were very wealthy because they were in the olive oil business, and you had Chachamim who made leather for a living. And if you don't know, that used to mean that you smelled terrible because you were working with feces the entire day, because they used feces to tan and to treat the product. So they weren't high class people, but they were still respected because of the knowledge that they learned and then they taught to others. So that's why the Harambam, and not really Harambam, the Talmud singles them out as being close to God, because they not only are they kind and they're there for people, but they know things that can get you closer to God. And just knowing a kind person, I'm not saying you should stop interacting with just kind people who are ignorant, but they also have an obligation to learn more and know more. That's the reason. Everyone should be higher and closer in the sense of knowledge of God or knowledge of mitzvot.
It really helps. Can I ask one more?
Please.
You were talking about not fearing death,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't fear death, maybe, but we cling to life, and life is beyond sacred. It's everything. So I'm just can you talk a little bit more about that?
Lo hametim hallelujah. The dead cannot praise God. We cling to life because we're able to develop our closeness to God only in life. Life is precious because it is fleeting. It's here today and gone tomorrow. It's not eternal. There's a very interesting interview that Larry King did with Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist.
Yeah, wonderful. It was a very nice excerpt.
Yeah, and he
said
asked,
that the shortness of life lets him have the focus for what he needs to do now.
Absolutely. The shortness of life gives us the focus. It makes it precious, and it makes it a commodity. When we are alive, we can do and engage in mitzvot. We can learn Torah. We can be with our families. We can improve the world around us. And all of that as a consequence is some sort of devikut or kerabot laHashem. But once we die, it's over. Everything we've developed, that's it. It's at that point that it's done. There's no more development after that. So that's why the clinging to life is important, because it's that precious thing that allows us growth, that allows us latitude, allows us to become better. But once the life ends, we can't do that anymore. Does that help answer, Eleanor?
Yes, it does.
All right, good. Thank you. Yoram, please.
I'll try to answer her slightly differently. Going from an Israeli military, when you go to war, if you are afraid, who is afraid should not join the army. That's the Torah or the Tanakh. Kol hayareh v'rach levav, go home. We don't need people that are panicking. Having said that, you go to war, you shouldn't fear to die, but you take caution. It's stupid not to have your helmet when bullets are going around, or when you ride your bicycle. So the fact we should do our best effort to stay alive and stay healthy, our hishtadlut. but we trust God when we go to war, because those who think, oh my God, I'm going to die, are very bad soldiers. You can't fight a war panicking. So it's a balancing act between trust in Hashem and being careful when you go to a minefield.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Anne?
I was thinking about what Eleanor had said about fearing death. I don't think it's so much a fear of death as it is a regret of the loss of life. You regret that you will not have more time live on this earth. It's not so much you fear the death, because to some people who are in excruciating pain, death comes as a savior. But it's the regret that you will no longer be in this world.
And what's very interesting, in the Talmud, when the Talmud gives us the idea, well, not the idea, when it instructs us that when we say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet at the passing of a person, that we don't say it in sadness. We're supposed to say it bisimcha, interestingly enough, which is a weird understanding, especially since when we think about death, we think about the mourning and the sadness and feeling that mourning and feeling that sadness. But when you say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, it's when you're saying it, you're acknowledging God as like the true judge, and that the world runs according to his judgment, for lack of a better word, and that we are happy to be part of that, and that we're happy, we're sad of the loss of life. We're happy that the world is running according to its, and it's actually a hard thing for me to understand. I haven't really wrapped my mind around it entirely, but it's an interesting thought. Now, and let's move on here to this paragraph. We're going to get a parable here that the Kuzari is going to explain. Once again, if you remember, probably 20 years ago when we started this, we talked about, he gave a parable of India, about the king of India being great and good, and he was comparing it to how we understand God being great and good. We've never met the king of India. We'll never meet the king of India. Why India specifically? Is it because it's a magical place of mysticism? No. It's because at this time, India was the other side of the world. It was far away. People probably, most people didn't hear about India, and if they heard of India, they probably didn't even go to India. And if they went to India, they probably never came back. Why? It's too much money. I go and I stay. I'm never coming back. So here, he's bringing up India again. Now, we cite the following analogy. A group of kinsmen became stranded in the desert. One of them found his way to India. He was received by the king of India, who courted him with honor and great prestige, because the king realized that this man was a member of this group, and that the father of this group used to be one of the king's close friends. So they did a little, Jewish geography here. Who are you from? Whose son are you? This and that. Oh my gosh, I was his college roommate. Here's a lot of money. Here, I'm going to give you all these great rewards. Okay. The king gave him precious gifts to bring back to his kinsmen in the desert. He also dressed him up in beautiful clothing and sent along with him some of his distinguished attendants. It never would have occurred to anyone that these important attendants would ever leave the king, and certainly not that they would ever travel into the desert, which is a place of desolation, and there's, it's the desert. The king obliged, let me go up here. The king obliged, the man to obey a set of commands, and made a pact with him, in which the man pledged fealty to the king. The man then traveled back to his kinsmen in the desert, accompanied by the Indian representatives. His friends were overjoyed upon the arrival of this entourage, and they built a palace for these distinguished attendants to live in. The rest of the group then sent a delegation back to India to see the king. They were now able to reach India without any trouble through the help of the king's representatives, who showed them the closest and straightest route. It was then that they realized that it is in reality quite easy for anyone who so desires to reach India, as long as he commits himself to the service of the king and honors the king's messengers appropriately when they are sent to him. They had no reason to question the need to serve the king, because it was obvious to all that the purpose was to become close to the king, and closeness to the king was the greatest good. Does anybody, how do we feel about that parable in regards to what we're learning here and what he's trying to demonstrate? Concerns, thoughts? Let it sink in for maybe another minute. Oh man, we could probably actually finish this chapter. Okay, let's see. All right. If you have any thoughts, please jump in whenever. Don't feel shy. I'm going to continue here with the Kuzari's explanation here. In this parable, the group of kinsmen is the Jewish people. The first of them who went to India is Moshe. The subsequent delegation is comprised of the other Jewish prophets. Joshua, Isaiah, Hezkel, Amos, Hosea, all of them. These are the prophets now. The delegation of the king. The Indian representatives of the king are the divine presence and the angels. The beautiful clothing is the spiritual light that rested upon Moshe's soul as a result of his prophecy, as well as the physical light that radiated from his face. This is the carne or that Michelangelo makes into the sharp horns that we see. The precious gifts sent by the king are the 2 tablets which contained the 10 commandments. So we see here that the way we understand our interaction with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the way that these people wandering in the desert understood their interaction with the king of India. Moshe Rabbeinu reaches the king of India through prophecy. I'm mixing metaphors here. Moshe Rabbeinu reaches HaKadosh Baruch Hu through prophecy, just as this fellow wandering in the desert reaches the king of India. And that reaching the king of India is a sublime experience that no one else has received like him. Every one of the subsequent delegates, they go to the king of India, but they don't receive that same reception that Moshe Rabbeinu received. And now we see the actual benefits. We see it in real time. We see the glow. We see the everything. There's no doubt in our mind in the desert that this was what had happened to Moshe, and we listen to the prophets for this reason. That's his understanding, his explanation. Now, anyone? Okay. The other religions, which derive from Judaism. Now, this is a controversial opinion, and most people will say that this isn't exactly true. It's not exactly true, but Hinduism, I mean, you can make connections between Judaism and other religions, and the reason I think that is because religion's a human experience, right? What I'm experiencing in Eretz Israel is going to be culturally different than someone someone experiencing a Hindu experience in India is, in terms of language and culture and context and content. But the mechanism is similar. We're going to have the same experiences, and we're going to try to explain them similarly, and because of our human condition. But I do want to point out that there are people who say that, for example, Hinduism derives from Judaism, that it's a descendant of Avraham Avinu, and that they have a lot of parallels. For example, in Hinduism, there's a god, a chief god, I guess. I could be using the wrong terminology, but the god's name is Brahman. Brahman refuses to be worshipped. He instructed his people not to worship him. But so instead of worshiping Brahman, they worship his various manifestations of Brahman, and that's Shiva and Ganush, these other gods that you might see, but they are all manifestations of Brahman. Brahman, they say, is just a a Hinduized version of Brahman. And Brahman's wife was Vatisara. Vatisara was his goddess wife, and Vatisara couldn't get pregnant, and there was a whole story there, and it parallels Abraham and Sarah, but it could just be that it's human experience again. Now, anyways, the other religions which derive from Judaism never were witness to any of this, meaning they weren't at Har Sinai. They didn't experience Mount Sinai like we experienced Mount Sinai. They didn't experience the desert like we experienced the desert. They just heard about it. Instead, their founders told their followers, pledge fealty to the king of India, just as those kinsmen did, and after death you will reach the king. So here he's saying that these, going back to our parable in the desert, that's someone in China, let's just say, heard about these wanderers in the desert and how they reached the king of India, and they said, wow, the king of India really helped them out. Well, here in China, we're being invaded by the Mongols. I'm not sure if this is historically accurate, but maybe if we pledge fealty to the king of India, when the Mongols kill us, we will then reach the king of India. So that's his explanation there. That doesn't exactly make logical sense. If you commit yourselves to him, the king will distance you from himself. Oh, excuse me, I skipped a line, didn't I? Sorry about that. And after death you will reach the king. If you do not commit yourselves to him, the king will distance you from himself, and will torture you after you die. That doesn't make any sense. Because of this, many of them have rejected their faith and have challenged it by saying, no one has ever returned from the dead to tell us that he has gone to the Garden of Eden or Gehinnom. Nevertheless, most of these religionists have accepted this view and have prevailed upon others as well to follow in their service, by using threats and intimidation in order to preserve their unity and power. Inwardly, their hope for this reward after death is weak, but outwardly they profess a strong faith in it. It is with this faith that they glorify themselves over their common folk. Very harsh criticism he has for religion in general. This reminds me of a comedian who explained that he said he's an atheist. He said, I appreciate religion because without religion we wouldn't get to be here all postmodern and snarky and making fun of religion. My ancestor, probably some weakling, told some caveman that instead of, just doing whatever he wants and having murder for dinner, that if he was a good person for his life, that he would go and he could have all the sky cake he wanted. And that this was happening all over the world. All these weaker people who were becoming powerful were telling stronger, murderous people, don't kill me and you'll get sky cake. But when in China it was sky pho, or that's not Chinese, I know, but and then sky baklava in the Middle East, and sky pie in Europe. And then when we all met and we crossed over and we said, hey, have you heard the good news about sky cake? We'd say, it's sky pie, and they would make wars over it, and then people would try. It's a whole thing. But this, he's basically saying this, that most religion isn't coming from when I say religion, I mean religious rituals, religious dogmas, religious doctrines. It isn't coming from an experience with the king or an experience with godliness. Not that people don't have the ability to access godliness. They can, 100%. Anyone can go to India. It's hard. It's far away. It's a dangerous trip, but you can make it there. It's not guaranteed, but you can make it there. What you can't do, what doesn't make sense, is to hear about somebody else's journey to India and then use that as your experience. When you do that, the religion then isn't something that is connecting you to God. Rather, it's a way to maintain power and to lord over other people who do not have your faith. It's a very interesting argument that he's making here. One that Freud makes in his book Moses and Monotheism, that when Jews are atheists, it's not really Judaism they're rejecting, but it's really Christianity that they're rejecting. And because of our semantic assimilation with the West, we chop up our religion with their religion and make this sort of chopped liver sandwich of Western and Jewish ideals that we reject because it doesn't make any sense to us. We're not actually rejecting the faith that would be if we experienced a true monotheistic experience, a true mystical experience. This is why, and I'm going to say why, quoting Harambam really, why mystical works and mystical teachings are not written down. They're not allowed to be. First off, you're not allowed to write them down. You're not allowed to promulgate mystical teachings in Judaism. And you might have a quizzed or puzzled look because you might have read several mystical books, or you know people who teach mystical works.
Chabad.
Exactly, Chabad, and not just Chabad. All versions of Hasidut. And the thing is that once you write down the mystical experience, and it becomes a one-size-fit-all, it doesn't work anymore. A mystical experience, a godly experience, is something that only you can process, experience. You cannot relate it to somebody else. The moment you put it into words, it loses all of its meaning for the person who's hearing it. This is why when the rabbis, when they had mystical experiences, they could only share what's called the Roshei Prakim, the heads of the chapters. And then the student who wanted to feel the mystical experience for himself, he had to make his own derasha. That is to say, he had to do it on his own. And then his teacher would either approve of it or not approve of it, meaning that he couldn't share what the mystical experience was, because it's personal, it's private. It's how do you say? I can't remember the word, which is ironic because it means to say. It's something you cannot share.
Change the phrase mystical experience to oral Torah for what you just said.
Okay. The oral Torah cannot be... So, with the oral Torah, it's something that... This is a good point. Mystical experience is part of the oral Torah, right? It's not the oral Torah. The oral Torah is the interpreter system to the interpretated system, right? The interpretated system is the written Torah. That's what's being interpreted. Is that a word? Interpretated? It sounds weird. That's what's being interpreted.
The word is interpreted.
I'm just pronouncing it weird. That's what I'm doing. It's interpreted. Thank you.
Interpreted, yeah.
Interpreted. And the oral Torah is what interpretates that system. That is passed on through a process called misirah. Misirah is where we get our word misorah from, right? Misirah is the surrendering of a document to the court, and once you surrender that document to the court, that document can be interpreted by the court and given new context and new meaning, and generated, and that document can have new meaning generated for it. An example of this, and I'm not getting political, I'm just using the example, is the Second Amendment, right? The Second Amendment, it says in the document that there should be... I'm not quoting it. I'm trying my best, so I'm just trying to remember the key words here. That there's a well-regulated militia, and the right for the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. So that's what the document says. Now, how do we interpret that document? What does that mean? Does it mean that there can be no gun regulations? Can it mean there can be gun regulations? Can it mean I can own a bazooka? Can it mean I can own a handgun? Do I own a shotgun? Is it talking only about muskets, or is it talking about AR-15s as well? That is all up for interpretation, and the courts and the Congresses, I don't know if the Congress really is the one who interprets it. I think the court does. The court interprets it and tells us, what does this mean? The same thing with the oral Torah. It says ayin tachet ayin in the Torah, an eye for an eye. That sounds like lex talionis, meaning a physical retribution. I lose my eye, and then I take your eye from you. But as Gandhi says, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So the rabbis, they take the word tachat, and they say this word is ambiguous. So we're going to interpret the word tachat as monetary. And this is the tradition we received from our ancestors, etc., and we're now interpreting it this way. That's oral Torah. So certain parts of the oral Torah you have to be explicit with. You can't just be coy with what ayin tachet ayin means and say, oh, you will figure it out. You just have to get there yourself. No, a law has to be clear. A law has to be clear and concise and clearly stated so that everyone can employ that law. The mystical experience, on the other hand, that's up to you to have, to decide, to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on your own terms. This is the problem with using the Zohar to make halacha. The Zohar is a beautiful poetic work, a love letter, if you will, from one person to the parashiot of the Torah. And there are words and there are phrases he is using in there that could be meaningless or nonsensical to a person who's, what does he mean? Zer and pin. What is it? Long face, short face, the orchard of apples. What are we talking about here? That was his experience. And once he wrote it down, it came almost unintelligible. And then you have people explaining, oh, it really means this, it really means that, and this is why we wear our tzitzit on the outside, or no, that's why we wear the tzitzit on the inside. And if this, it muddies the water, so to speak. Yoram.
I view mystical, Mark, slightly different. For me, the oral Torah is another form. Like the Jews' whole religion is oral, never written anywhere, and it deals with laws. To me, mystical is, and I've seen a lot of it, people document near-death experience. And, you know, the Jews always see a Jewish context, and I heard from few, they became Chabad, and they were on trial in front of the Lamed Vav, the 36 tzaddikim, and they saw light. And Christians would have similar experience, but with non-Jewish characters.
Of course.
But they all have similar things of near-death experience. It's documented in books. That's, to me, is a mysterious. Nobody can really say, oh, the Lamed Vav tzaddikim were there. I was on trial. And this guy who is now Chabad said, I said I'll be a good guy. And he's now putting tefillin, grow a beard, the whole 9 yards of Chabad, except his tattoos when he, you know. So that's, to me, is a near-death experience, which is mystical, because there's really no evidence.
Thank you. And this is actually also what the prophetic experience is. The prophetic, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tamir.
Yeah, is the relationship that you're describing to mystical experiences, is that sort of a concept that comes from the Miknagdim, that there, it's sort of it's a response against Chassidut and the Kabbalists?
No, this is Talmudic. This is the orchard. This is the Pardes of Rabbi Akiva.
So it's older than that.
Arba nichnasu lePardes, the four entering into the Pardes.
Right, and you're describing a tradition that's much older. Right.
This is tradition that's much older. It's the tradition as laid out in the Moreh Nevuchim. The Moreh Nevuchim was Harambam trying to preserve the roadmap to the mystical experience. Right? That's why it's called, in Arabic, the Dalalat al-Hayarin, the signpost for the person who is lost in the desert. Meaning that it's not going to say you go into your room and you sit on this carpet, you light this candle and you take the whatever and you say this mantra. That's not what it's trying to do, but it's trying to get you through to negate aspects of God and go through a process of mental apophysis, meaning that you now are seeing God through the negative experience. And I don't mean like not great, not good, but you start to negate God is not this, God is not that. The more and that's why that's why the first section is a dictionary, basically, where he says, how do we understand Selim Elohim? How do we stand? What do we mean when we say God stands? Do we mean this? Do we mean that? That's why the first slog is kind of dry, because all it's trying to do is to mentally tune your vocabulary. Once your vocabulary is mentally tuned, you can describe the world and the experiences a little bit better. And each time you describe the experiences a little bit better, you go through another stage of apophysis, where you remove misconceptions from your mind. That eventually will lead, through observance of mitzvot, to a experience of Ruach HaKodesh, I believe. And that Ruach HaKodesh here is this connection, this closeness to God. It's the ruach of, it's the spirit, it's like the spirit of being in the mikdash. And being in the mikdash, that's the closest physical manifestation a person can have of closeness to God. Which is why it's not a daily experience, it's a yearly or whatever experience. You do it 3 times a year. It's not meant to be an everyday experience. It's too much. It cheapens the experience. That's why even the Kohanim, they have, what do you call it? Like the army reserves, the 2 weeks a month, 3 months a year, whatever. They go through cycles of being in the temple. It's not a constant thing because it needs to be something that you, like the Sulam of Yaakov, like the ladder of Yaakov, you ascend, but you have to descend again. You have to come back to the regular grind of life, so to speak. You can't stay up there. It can be related. It can be seen in terms of the. I think the mitnagdim and the Hasidim are missing the point in the regard here of like they're fighting over something, but they're both Kabbalists. Actually, they're both Kabbalists. The Gaon of Vilna was a master Kabbalist. He was a very Kabbalistic person. He and the Baal Shem Tov, I don't think, disagreed on any content. I think they disagreed on how to go about it, and that's where their little war comes from. Also, there was halachic things that got in the way, political stuff, and that's, I think, for another class, another time. I see.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I see it's 10:04. We'll stop here today. I had a very silly idea that we would actually finish it, but we're not. We have another paragraph. Oh, we have a bit more to go. Never mind. We have a bit more to go till we get to the 110, and then we're almost there to the last stretch. And any comments, questions, thoughts, concerns?
I have a postscript if you'd like.
Please, I would like to hear it.
With that short passage between Neil deGrasse Tyson and Larry King, I have that, and I could share it if you'd like.
Please. Let's see here. Let me.
Okay, you have to stop sharing. There we go. Let me see if this works. Hold on.
You should be able to.
Does Avi have a class, and is it in person?
For Lunch and Learn, yes. It's in person at the JCC. It's also on Zoom. Go to the JCC, have lunch with him.
Screen.
Joseph, do you know if Rabbi Seltzer's class is going to happen that's through Temple Emmanuel because he's away for his brother?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I would check with Temple Emmanuel.
Send him an email.
Which class? The Zohar class? Or the Christianity?
Oh, no, he has the second half of the Christianity one, the beginnings of Christianity, starting today at 1:30.
Peter Paul.
Okay.
Peter Paul, that one.
I don't know about that one. I know he's still planning to do tomorrow's Zohar class.
Okay.
Oh, okay. He's probably going to do it from back east or something.
I didn't know it was. What happened?
His brother-in-law is in